And so that checking in with yourself and making a plan so that the transition is as smooth as possible is super important, because some of the things that I decided to do that didn't work actually had impact on people that were following me, because they're like, I'll follow you over here. And then they're like, what are you doing? And I'm like, I don't know. What are you doing?
What are you doing?
And so
yeah,
it was just one of those moments where we're both staring at each other. We don't know what we're doing. We don't know what's happening.
Awkward.
So, yeah, it just awkward moments. You don't want to have those awkward moments.
Right.
So,
right.
You just don't do it.
Everybody, welcome to Pros Talking Prose. Today, Troy and I are again masochistically in a frame of mind, so we're ready to torture each other and you. We're gonna be talking about something that's probably near and dear to our hearts, because we're both kind of going through this a lot lately. This year, 2025. It seems to be the year of the pivot. So we're going to kind of talk a little bit about author pivots, what those kind of look like for authors, and when and how to pivot when you're an author in this business and you're trying to figure out how to navigate changing waters and tides and winds and all the metaphors you can think of. So, we're going to discuss that. So I'm ready to dig in. How about you, Troy? We ready?
I am ready to dig in.
We're ready to dig in.
One of my favorite topics, really.
Okay, awesome. Well, I'm glad it's one of your favorite topics. It's actually one of mine too. So I'm excited. So let me get us started on basically what a pivot is, so that people understand what that means. So when you're in business for yourself, or in business at all, actually, this is something that you need to understand that happens. And I know it's really, really hard, because we all like to stay the same. We don't like change. As humans, this is a very common trait that we all tend to love stasis, which is like where everything is just stays the same. But that is just not reality. So things change. This industry changes. We've talked about this multiple times, Troy. This industry changes on a dime, and it really, really does. So when we talk about those changes and how it can come and impact your business, it can impact the way your metadata is organized. It can impact the way your book is positioned on its distribution outlets. It can impact numerous things. You have to adjust, because if you don't, then what can happen is your business and your book could just disappear into the ether. So we don't want that to happen. We want you to make sure that you stay valid and accessible, and your audience knows how to get you, and they can. So that's basically what we're going to talk about today. And when you're running a business, Troy, like an author, I'm going to rely a lot on you today to kind of express how that happens and what that might look like for an author. I'll approach this from a business standpoint, and kind of give the macro approach, because this could apply to you in any way, shape, or form. And so as a project manager / business owner / guru, or I'm not going to call myself a guru. I'm not even going to go there, but person who absolutely obsesses and loves business and loves the way you can focus yourself on and put yourself in that business mindset. I will approach it from that mindset. So, very first thing I want to talk about is understanding that word pivot. And what that means is to strategically change or adjust the way you're doing something in your business in order to accommodate things that could negatively or positively impact your business. Does that make sense? So you're going to change your direction if like marketing demands are going to pull you a different direction, or if maybe your customer needs you to solve a different problem, which is one of the reasons why I've had to pivot a few times. I have customers that come to me and they need, certain things filled, certain aspects of their lives filled and improved upon. And so I'm going to like do the best to pivot my business to help solve those problems. But with authorship and with books, I think there's kind of this mindset that like, oh, well, I wrote a book and, I can't change the book. The book is out there. But there's so much more to being an author in business. So, Troy, let's talk about the data that drives these kinds of decisions. What kind of data and what kind of like market feedback would cause you to make adjustments in your business?
Okay. Well, first, I'm going to start by saying, first of all, how similar this is to other businesses, but I think that's part of the problem.
Mm-hmm.
Part of the problem is authors want to see their business as something different than what it actually is. And that's because we have this thing of this artistry, and we've created this thing, and it's this beautiful thing, and it's a wonderful thing, and people just are going to love this thing, and you may be right, but at the end of the day, it's a product that you need to sell.
Exactly.
And so the data that we're talking about with pivots, and there's a couple different kinds, because there's a business pivot and then there's your personal pivots in your personal life that often, for writers especially, impact your business, right? Those two things are like not exclusive. So we'll talk about personal pivots in a minute, but sometimes what happens from the industry is just the feedback that your sales go down,
Mm-hmm.
your ads stop working, you get some negative reviews, or some people even come to you that are your peers or whatever and say, hey, these are some things with this series that really just don't work, or whatever the case may be. And you have to make the decision of, what do I do about that? Do I let
Mm-hmm.
that series just die and move on and write something else? Do I revise that series, put new covers on it? What do I do about that to make that series palatable to today's reader? Because it may have worked 10 years ago, but it doesn't work today, or whatever the case may be. So there's the other thing is, you stop earning as much money, which all kind of relates to those other things as well. Well, if you're doing this as a business, you have to look at, well, maybe I need a different ad strategy. Maybe I need to advertise on a different platform. Maybe I need to do some things differently in order to try to make this work, right? To try to still make this work, but to move a different direction, right? So there's all kinds of things that can cause you to need to pivot, but it's just that you need to be looking at that data all the time. Like,
That was going
what
to
are
be my
my
point.
interactions on social media? Well, if the interactions on Facebook are disappearing, or you have tons of interaction, but that's not actually selling you any book, then maybe Facebook is not the right place for you to advertise or to spend your social media time or to focus on. Maybe instead you need to focus on TikTok until it doesn't sell and it gets banned in the United States, or whatever happens to it. And in that case, then where are you going to go from there? What's that pivot? So some of those pivots are forced upon you, like platforms change, things change, reader habits change, things like that. And you're forced to pivot, not because you want to, but because the industry itself has changed and you need to. So you need to be looking at that data. Otherwise, you can't know when to pivot.
Okay.
I mean,
So
you
let's
can't,
talk about the type of data that can make you change. So one of the things, like you mentioned, is sales. People, I think it happens more so than not, but a lot of times authors get into this business and they don't even know how to read their sales reports. So
Mhm.
one of the things that you should know and understand is how to find that information, understand how that information drips into that feedback, and really kind of know what to watch when it comes to that
Mhm.
feedback. So a good example of this is, we'll just use a generic, is Amazon reports their sales through KDP pretty close to daily. I mean, like I think there's a little bit of a lag. Sometimes you can see things as quickly as like real time, but that is not, I would never count on it, because there's
Yeah.
always going to be a lag. So yeah, but you could probably look at the day before and pretty much count on those numbers. One of the things that they'll give you feedback on is like how many sales you made and what medium the sale was made. And they'll tell you like, so they'll tell you how many units were sold. And they're not going to tell you which market that was from. They're not going to tell you, how that customer was acquired or how they found you. They're just going to report that that unit was sold for this medium of book or this offering that you have. So it's very generic. It's very basic. You're going to get more feedback from like you said, those social media kind of scores. The analytics that come through in social media are a lot more detailed. You can see demographics better. You can see kind of like their their traffic pattern, like if they came in through a different refer, or if they came in from a direct, typing it directly into Google or directly into the search bar. So you can get a little bit more detail from that. Your website is going to give you a lot more detail. Like you're going to know where people are coming from there. But like I said, social media is probably your better bet on demographics. So whenever you're directing sales, you can kind of follow the slug trail, I'm going to call it, because you can kind of follow that a little bit. If you notice that you've seen, like, say you're running an ad, the ad gets, 78 clicks. Out of those 78 clicks, you can see where they come in at, hopefully, because if you've got pixels set up right and everything. So you'll see where that click happened, or if they bought it on Amazon, you'll be able to see, okay, I had 78 clicks this week. How many people actually bought the book? And you can see if that resulted in any kind of conversions. Those numbers you should be watching, because those are the numbers that can trigger you to pivot an ad set. It can trigger whether or not you want to stay on a certain platform or move to a different one. It can trigger like headlines. It can trigger the change in your book blurb, wording, all kinds of things. So pay attention to certain things that you're doing in terms of like, pay attention to the data, I guess is what I'm trying to say, because the data is going to tell you like what should change and maybe what to experiment with, so that you understand like, oh, I changed that last week and I got an uptick in my sales. Well, then maybe that was a good thing, but you need to pay attention closely or you're not going to know. If you don't know your analytics, if you don't know your numbers, then you're not going to understand what's happening. You're just going to be guessing.
But a word of caution, because what tends to happen with authors is they go from not paying attention at all to paying too much attention. So ad data, I generally would say that when you're in the initial learning phase, maybe you want to check it every couple days, but you want to give your ad some time to figure out where it's going to land and see where it's going to perform. Then you should probably be checking it about once a week. Okay, checking it more often than that. First of all, what's going to happen to you, because the things that happen with ads are little pivots, small pivots, and we're talking small versus big pivots, right? You don't want to change your book blurb everywhere every week.
No, I'm talking,
you know what
like,
I mean? But so ads, you're gonna be looking at those, and those are little pivots, little testing, and we'll talk about that on one of these episodes about the little pivots you can do to test different things. But big pivots, as far as like changing your cover, changing your book blurb, things like that, like what you're looking for is long-term trends. So you look at your Amazon sales a month at a time and see, where is the trend this month? And then you start to look at them when you've been doing this long enough, you start to look at them annually, because we all know at the end of summer and just before school starts, so mid-August to about mid-September, there is a sales slump. You know why? Mommies, all the mommies that are reading your books are back to school shopping, getting Johnny ready to go back to school. Everybody's taking their last minute vacation before school starts. Mid-September hits and they're like, everybody's back in school. Thank God I can read again. And they buy books, right?
Mhm.
But starting about mid 1st of August to about the middle of August, sales drop every single year for every single author in every single genre. And it's different to a different extent, right? And you see the same thing first part of February every year, usually have about a 2 week dip and then
Yeah, I
things
was going
come
to say
back,
March is
right?
your big sales peak.
So don't make big changes in February because you're like, oh my God, my sales dropped. Of course they drop. They drop
Mhm.
every year for everybody. That's just a trend. That's just the way
Mhm.
things work. So look at things like a month at a time, a few months at a time, and look for trends. If your sales are on a steady downward decline and you're still running ads to them and you're still doing all the
Ooh,
marketing things, and they're not coming back up, then that's the time you need to make a pivot. You need to intervene. You need to figure out what's going on. Your keywords might be wrong. Your categories might be wrong. The ad
mhm.
might be wrong.
Well, I will
There's a
say
million different things that could happen. So
everything does stagnate. So if you're running an ad for a long period of time, I mean, we're kind of getting into ads here, but like when you're
yeah,
running an ad for a long period of time, you're going to need to change it every so often anyway, because ads tend to kind of get a little stale. So
yeah, you wear out
you wear out
your
your
audience,
right.
and you can
So
analyze that as
mhm,
part of your data. But
mhm,
when we're talking about like major author pivots, like I'm going to change my cover and my blurb, I'm going to re-edit my book, I'm going to change genres and write in a completely different genre because this genre isn't working anymore. Those types of pivots are the bigger the pivot, the more data you need for a longer term before you make that pivot. What I see a
right.
lot is authors go, this genre is popular. I'm going to write vampires. This genre is popular. I'm going to write werewolves. And then their readers have no idea what they write because they're providing no consistency. Remember, when we talk about a lot of things, we talk about sustainability in your author career, and sustainability is not making pivots too often.
Right.
So that your readers understand your brand and who you are and all that kind of stuff. So I'll give you an
That's
example.
what
So I'm
oh,
going
okay, go
through
ahead.
like totally revamping my website,
Mhm,
separating my stuff that I do for authors from my stuff that I do for readers completely, like pulling them absolutely apart.
mhm.
Before this point, before deciding to do this pivot and doing this pivot, I had the same website serving both authors and readers for 15 years. So, and that website has gone through changes, but before making a major change in like, let's split those things off and let's make this into, and I've had other friends that have recently done this exact same thing because we were both serving writers and authors. And I went through my old blog posts and found, man, I was creating all kinds of stuff for writers, not enough stuff for readers, right? So I was helping authors, wasn't really nurturing my readers as much as I should have been. Right. So I made a major pivot. Changing your website after 15 years is a major pivot, but I didn't decide that because last month sales dropped by 4 sales, in this area. No, that's not at all what's happening. Right. So just be aware and be cautious of understanding what's actually happening in your industry, what you're actually doing, and don't make major pivots for no reason.
I will make this point just really quickly is that because it really kind of goes in line with what you're saying, but what people really need to understand is that the right time to pivot might not be obvious. It
Mhm.
might come in subtly and it might just feel like, oh, I've got a gut feeling that something needs to happen. I want you to reject the gut feeling a little bit and I want you to kind of like put it on like the back burner and I want you to use the gut feeling as a trigger but not use it for the reason to
Mhm.
pivot needs to be a little more up here and a little less here. Although
Mhm.
I will say that Troy's idea about, the reason he pivoted is probably a lot of this in cooperation. But I will say that this should be the trigger. This should be the reason,
Mhm.
always, because
For sure.
because it a lot of times we make decisions with our hearts, and then we don't really think about it, and that kind of tends to us to jump before thinking about it.
A lot of authors tend to be very much heart thinkers and gut thinkers, right?
Yeah.
And depending upon your Enneagram type and all kinds of stuff we talk about, right?
Yeah.
But you're absolutely right in that it should be a trigger to make you go do some research and determine if this is really what you need to do. The other thing is, don't just do research and rely on total facts too. Talk to your friends who are authors. Talk to people in the industry who know what's going on. They may have a finger on the pulse of what's happening. We talked about K-Lytics when we talked about like subgenres and stuff like that.
Yeah.
K-Lytics does a good job of, like, once a quarter, they put out this big report and analyze the industry as a whole and what genres are doing what and what those trends look like, right? And so you need to go to those and look at those and see, okay, before you make a decision to jump genres, what is actually happening with my genre? Is this just my books? What's happening with this? So research is more about, in more detail, looking at those trends from different perspectives. Don't just go with your, oh man, my sales are going down. My gut tells me I should go write about vampires. Don't do that. There's better ways to do that.
Right. Well, I will say this too. I mean, like, let's just hit on some of these, because you're kind of hitting on something I wanted to kind of touch on, which, let's talk about the actual reasons you might decide to pivot. Like, what are some of the reasons that you would do this then? Because if we're talking about like, oh, you want to watch your numbers and you want to know why, well, what are some reasons that would make you want to actually change? It's not just lower sales numbers. Like you said, sometimes that's not the real reason you would change. I feel like one of the reasons why I would say that a pivot might be needed is if you have repeated comments over and over and over again, or rejections for a specific reason. So say you've got an ad and you're getting repeated comments or repeated rejections on that ad, or you're not getting the traction on it. Or say that you have a book and you've written a book, and this book is giving you this one repeated over and over comment that says, in chapter 4, there's this major plot hole, and they keep saying it over and over again. Like, maybe there's a reason why you might do a second edition of that book. Things like that. Just prioritize those kinds of things. Maybe you love writing, like Troy said, vampire fiction, like you like writing vampire fantasies, but vampire fantasy seems to be kind of trending out, and you want to kind of make sure that you stay valid or kind of more in tune with what's happening in the market. Then you might want to change genres, but you want to do, like you said, do the research. Maybe, we talked about market shifts and technology shifts. This is a major one. I'm going to let you kind of touch on this. I mean, because you were just coaching me on some of this stuff just now, but one of the things that I've noticed in my own business is that, and this may be true for everybody, I guess, up until like in the last 5-10 years, but even now it's like taking off even more. But one of the things that usually slows businesses down 100% of the time is the amount of time that we have to invest in our businesses doing mundane things. So traditionally what businesses do is they hire people that can perform those tasks. But when you are a solopreneur, authorpreneur, somebody that's like running a one-man show and you don't have a large budget to hire people, the idea of hiring somebody to kind of take on some of these mundane things was very like kind of out of the realm of reality. However, technology is shifting, right? So one of the things that Troy was talking about was that he has come into like really spend a lot of time recently on automations and what automations can be doing for him. And with the way AI has really kind of like just taken huge leaps in technology, right now. He's utilizing automations for his author business. So, Troy, let's talk about what you're doing to help your author business run a little more smoothly so you can spend more time on things that are more important to you.
Well, yeah. So one of the reasons for pivoting in your author business is that things are not fun or that you're out of balance.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one of the biggest things that's difficult when you do this for money is balancing the amount of time that you spend trying to do marketing, trying to boost promotions, trying to make money, and the amount of time you spend writing and creating the next book.
Right.
Because writing and creating the next book is the funnest part. So, and some of this other stuff is not as fun, or it can be fun, but you need to find ways to make it creative and fun and a part of your process, right? But one of the ways that you can save time is by doing simple things like automating some of your social media. And what I mean is not being 100% not present on your social media, because you still need to be present to an extent, but automating the process and the timing of putting up posts. And so there for a long time there has been social media automation, social media scheduling software out there. And a part of this, some of this stuff that we're doing now with AI, the only reason it's coming more to the forefront with automations is before AI, you had to be a coder and a pretty good one to automate a lot of this stuff. Or like you had to spend a lot of time with a lot of these different things. But anyway, now there's tools to do it and AI tools that can help you do it and help you do it faster. Same thing like Stacey and I use an AI calendar that helps
Mm-hmm.
us schedule tasks and helps us stay on task and focus on doing things the way we should be doing them. But anyway, so I'm using automations in a way of like creating marketing assets. Now I still have to have a human eyes on them and look at them. I still have to upload them, all that kind of stuff. There's still things I still have to do, but it makes the process much faster and much easier to do. So email and marketing is just one of those things. Some of the things what was the thing we were just talking? Anyway, there's just some mundane
Oh,
things that you have to do.
just when I was talking about onboarding clients or like
Oh
sending
yeah.
people through.
Um, so automations for like once you get them on your email list, so basically getting them from whatever platform they come from
Yeah,
to your email list
yeah.
and delivering to them like different freebies or whatever it is that you want to do, then once
Or
you
even
get them
just
into that
different,
list, then
yeah, different content
as
that they
they
need at that stage in their, but yeah, wherever,
well,
yeah.
right.
So just
And as the
wherever,
readers do different things, as they move through reading your books or whatever, you can have systems in place that will say, hey, thanks for reading that book, I'd really love, if you left a review, that really means a lot.
right,
Different things like that, that you don't have to remember, oh, so and so got that book 7 days ago, and I should probably send them an email and see if they liked it and if they want to write a review. Instead, you can have your system automatically do that, but you can also have your email system set up in such a way that if somebody replied to your email already, that they don't get that email.
right,
Right, so you can have different things set up that basically help you, that you don't have to remember things, you don't have to do that, you don't have to go spend a whole bunch of time in social media. So you can spend half of a day each month scheduling your social media post for that month, and then you're done, and the rest of the month you can spend writing, or you can have everything set up in such a way that when a reader comes to you through a Facebook message or whatever, they get sent to, hey, I'm pretty busy writing the next book. I'm not necessarily going to answer this message right away, but here's a way that you can get a hold of me or let me know what you need or whatever the case may be. And if it's truly urgent, mark it urgent and email me here or something along that line. And it just frees you up to be a person and
right.
to go and do the things that you need to do, but you can still post at Monday at 10:30, even if you're at work at that time, or even if you're off doing something with your family or whatever it is that you're doing.
Hmm.
So there's just different things that you can do to make. So I recommend that you either whatever you are in your author journey, that you don't hesitate to pivot into the use of technology to make your life easier and make your job easier. It's
Yeah.
just what that does is that keeps you away from that marketing and drudgery burnout. where you're like, I feel like I'm having to sell things all the time, like a used car salesman, and I don't get to even write anymore. That's not what we want for you. So that is a type of pivot, but it's definitely something that because the industry has pivoted and marketing has pivoted, and we have all these cool new tools, you can pivot with it, and
Right.
so there's that.
There's that. Yeah. Okay. So perfect. So, okay. So first, like I was going to talk about, like pivoting is like something. Okay, we've kind of hammered that into the ground. But let me talk about like how to actually go about that. So the first thing that you need to do, especially if you already have systems in place, like I do right now, like it would be very, very difficult for me to just kind of take my moving train and put another moving train in front of it and just slam it into it, because what would happen is all my passengers on my moving train would literally be obliterated or thrown from my tracks. So
Yep.
that's an analogy I can use right there. So when you've got already a system in place, it's not a good idea to try to already like just jump the track and move everybody over to this new system without communicating that or without giving them a smooth transition. So the first
Hmm.
thing you need to do is kind of like like Troy threw a whole bunch of stuff at me today, and I'm sitting here going, okay, how do I implement all this? Well, the very first thing I need to do is, instead of like jumping into, oh, well, I'm going to start doing this and like start like building the systems out, I actually have to sit down and I have to organize where I'm going to make the changes and what's still going to stay in place and how this is all going to work. So the first one I need to communicate with is me. I need to have a good check in
Yes.
with me and where I feel like these changes would actually be beneficial for my business, my clients, and for me. And if they're going to derail one of us, then it's not going to be beneficial, because if a client is derailed, I'm derailed. And if I'm derailed, my clients are going to be derailed. So we have to kind of stay in
Hmm.
sync. So the first thing I need to do is have an outline kind of broken down of what I want to try and see what will work, and where I want to go, what destination I'm shooting for, and then how I feel like I can make that happen smoothly. So the
Hmm.
first thing is to identify and prioritize those areas that I want to change, and you can use tools to kind of help you do that, but you want to prioritize, analyze, and have a real heart to heart with you and where things are at and how you want them to change. That's the first thing I
Hmm.
think you should do. So
Yes. Yeah. Check in with yourself and determine, because it's exactly what Stacey says. If I suddenly change everything without a transition period, like if I suddenly change my website, but I don't have a transition period, I don't have a forwarding thing happening, I don't have any of that stuff in place, everyone that has been following me and going to that website is now lost.
right.
And I have given them no roadmap of
Yep.
where to go. And the other part is that I then can become lost, which is why it's really important you check in with yourself first, because you need to know where you're going. You need a step by step plan for a pivot. Now,
Mhm.
sometimes, so many of you know, I had a big career pivot last September that
Mhm.
was not my choice. Right. And so that was thrown at me, and I had to make an immediate pivot. Well, what
Mhm.
happened at that particular time was I did some things that didn't work out in the long run because they were a reaction, not a real pivot.
Right.
Reacting is not really a pivot.
Mhm.
Reacting is seeing something that's going on in your life that's wrong, and you just go, ah. It's like
Mhm.
somebody pulls in front of you and slamming on the brakes. Yeah, you avoided an accident, but that is not the way you want to drive all the time, just going around slamming on your brakes.
Aw,
That's going to
really?
create some problems.
I drive
Yeah,
like that.
I,
No.
I
Just
know. It took me to the ghetto in Vegas like that. But anyway, um But no, I mean, she was weaving. We didn't get shot. It was awesome. No, but
I told you to get down.
like,
It's fine.
yeah, it's fine, but yeah, no, but a real pivot is that moment where you take in consideration, you say, oh, my exit is coming up off the freeway. You turn on your signal, you get in the lane that you're supposed to be in, and you gently exit the freeway. But the problem is, in our lives, not all pivots happen that way.
Right.
Sometimes it is a sudden thing. So once you get over the reaction phase, you need to slow down and make a plan, right?
Mhm.
Do what you need to do to get through the moment and then slow down and make a plan.
I will make a date. I will literally put like a date on a post-it note, and put it on my desk. And I will say, okay, by this date, I'm going to hit this milestone. And it will be for me, it is a ride or die kind of thing. I will fall on my face across the finish line, smashing my face into the ground, getting to that finish line, because that I realized, that date was my date. That was the date I was going to happen. But one of the things that I also should do, and I don't do enough, but it's something that I always recommend to do as I say, not as I do. But this is something that I think would be really a good bit of advice. And that is, always give yourself a timeline and permission to also adjust. You're gonna make this big change, don't just have a deadline that says, okay, by this date I want to have this done. Also tell yourself, I'm giving myself this time to adjust. I'm giving myself to that date. If you look at it with that different perspective, it might feel a little less stressy. I think it would be for me if I did
Mhm.
that. I feel like I would be less inclined to go, smashing my face across the finish line.
Yeah, because the danger of that is that you end up burning out or quitting
Or
partway
yeah.
through.
So give
And if you
yourself
quit
permission.
partway through a pivot, or the other thing that can happen is the pivot takes too long and it's costly. Like there are
Mhm.
two services that I wanted to get rid of, and I was hoping to get rid of them this month, right?
Mhm.
Because of the pivot that I've made to new software and to a new way of doing things, I can get rid of both of them. That sounds fantastic, right? Getting rid of both of them, because total they're over a little over $100 a month that I'm paying
Yeah, I
for,
have a
that I
couple
don't
of
have to
those
pay for
myself.
anymore, right?
Mhm.
So I don't have to pay for them anymore. But both of them were scheduled to come out of my account today. No,
Mm.
yesterday.
Yeah.
Yesterday. And guess what both of them did?
Came
Came out
out.
of my account yesterday because I wasn't done yet, right?
Mhm.
Some of the systems I need to put in place to fully change those didn't happen. So I'm
Yep.
like, oh,
Yep.
okay. Well, in order to make that work now for the next months going forward, I have to phase that out within the next month. Otherwise, I'm going to end up paying for it again.
Right.
So just be aware that, like, if you take too long, or if you, and in this case it's not too long necessarily, it's just, but just understand that things can be costly if you're doing that,
Mhm.
and that you not having a solid plan. Like, this is a plan that, for me, has been in place for probably 3 months or longer. I was
Mhm.
thinking about it before that. So actually, but I mean, the actual planning in place is like 3 months long. And fortunately, what has happened is I've developed some tools and seen some things along the way that have helped me speed up that process. Right. But
Right.
so when we talk about a pivot, like, to the outside world, it's going to look like a sudden, look, Troy totally changed his websites and stuff. Man, what a big pivot. But everything is in place in the background to make it a smooth transition for everyone, because it's been actually a long time planning. So it's
Right.
not a sudden shift. It's a gradual shift.
And
So
and
anyway.
and by setting up this timeline, you're actually, like I said, giving yourself permission to take that time. And
Hmm.
that, I think that's very important. That's a mental health check right there, because changing, like you said, it can be
Hmm.
uncomfortable. I have the same thing. I have like a few subscriptions that I would love to offload because I don't utilize them to the max of their
Yes.
ability, and I've got a lot of redundancy in my systems right now. So to get rid of some of these would be very helpful for my pocketbook and also for my brain, because I feel for some reason I have guilt, laden guilt about not using certain things that I have. And so to offload those would be just a huge
Hmm.
weight lifted from my shoulders. But so yeah, don't just give yourself permission. The next thing I want to touch on is communicating changes to your stakeholders. Keep in mind that, there's so many times where I make changes in my life and I don't tell. I think for some reason, I feel like as a solopreneur, authorpreneur, sometimes we'll feel like, well, this is only going to affect me. But there really are more people that are affected by all this. So one of the things that I try really hard to do, and probably it's probably information overload sometimes to some people who I choose to consider stakeholders in my business, but a lot of times I will make phone calls to people that don't necessarily have a stake in my business, but that are very, very much going to be deeply impacted by changes that I make. So I check
Hmm.
I check in with them. I let them know this is what I'm planning. Is this something that's in line with you? Is there a way that I can accommodate you as I'm making this change? Like, how can I make this easy for you and also, meet your needs as I make this change? Check in with your important people. And again,
Hmm.
especially with personal, because you talked a little bit about personal pivots. Your business, especially when you are an author, let's not pretend, let's not skirt around this. When you're creative, anytime you're creative, um, your personal life is like wrapped around that business as a cocoon. And I was laughing because one of my best friends, she said to me one time that, like, she says, Stacey, you can pretend like you are taking the weekend off, but anytime I talk to you, what are you talking about? You are talking about like,
Hmm.
oh, I should probably be doing this, or oh, that's a really good idea, I should probably write that down. So your brain is never really turned off of your business.
Oh, yeah,
So
no.
maybe you should check in with your spouse and your significant other and your family members as well, to let them know, hey, I'm going to be
Yeah.
doing this. So when my brain is like a little extra occupied, this is what's going on. What do you guys think about that?
Yeah, and I think this is a thing too of like we kind of talked about it before, but well, and first of all, I'll just say that if you are a full-time writer or full-time creative of any kind, this is not a job, it's a lifestyle.
Yep.
And so your people that you surround yourself with need to be okay with the fact that it is a lifestyle,
Yeah.
that like you will get totally absorbed in things,
Hmm.
right? That will happen.
It will
Okay.
happen. Yeah.
So that's a part of it. The other thing is when you're making a pivot, especially any kind of a major career pivot or major pivot in what you're doing, check in with your network, not only to let them know what's happening,
Hmm.
but to let them rein you in from time to time and say,
Yeah.
dude, no, that is crazy. Don't do that, because they may be right. Right.
Right.
And you may need to take another minute to consider what they're talking about before you suddenly make that jump. Okay. And suddenly make that leap. So, just don't be afraid to check in with people. People are here. Gosh, most of the time, people really do want to help you.
Right.
They really do want to be in your corner and by your side. And if you have those negative people that aren't doing that, then just get rid of them. But there
Yeah,
comes a
that's
time
true.
when you just need to get them out of your lives.
Right.
But I mean, check in with your network to let them know what's happening so they don't suddenly go, where did Stacy go?
Yeah.
But also so that they can tell you if you're doing something like maybe you should take a little more time to do this. Maybe this is a little bit rash. Maybe, that type of thing.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. And another, like, this goes in with checking in, but check in with the people that you're changing for. Like, it's always a good idea
Mm.
to if you're an author and you're doing this because you've been getting some feedback from people, maybe you reach out to those people and say, hey, I'm going to make a change based on your feedback, thank you so much for that. Could you check in with me after I've finished this change?
Mm.
And would you be willing to kind of like give me some feedback on what you think about the change and how it happened, and what you think now that this is happening? It's a really good idea to build in those feedback moments, those buy-in moments, those moments that you can have your audience check in with you, and that will help you build momentum as well
Hmm.
as really solidify some solid fans, guys. You get that kind of
Hmm.
personal one-on-one contact with people that you let them know, look, I cared enough to listen to what you had to say, and I'm going to make this change because of that. It really does cement those people in your ecosphere. They're going to want to stick it out with you because they're going to feel important. They're going to feel like, oh wow, that was this
Hmm.
guy cared about me enough to change. Like, that's important. That's awesome. I'm going to stick around with this guy. So build that in. It's going to help you actually be able to see those numbers better too.
Hmm.
Ask, do surveys,
Oh
do
my goodness, yes.
calls to action. Like, ask for feedback, ask for action so that you can see those numbers, right? So that's what I would
Hmm.
say. When anytime you're making kind of adjustments, you want to make sure that you're building in that feedback.
Yeah,
Anyway,
build in
so
a feedback loop for sure.
yeah,
With the
exactly.
people that care about you, the people you're doing it for, with everybody around you, so that you make sure, first of all, that you're making a good decision, but also that you just make them aware change is coming. This is what's happening. I really want you to be a part of it, but for you to be a part of it, we really need
Yeah,
to,
right.
you know, but anyway, yeah.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
pivots are tough. I mean, they're
Mhm.
necessary, they're fun at times, but they really are tough.
They really are. They can be. I say start small. Don't make
Hmm.
huge changes. Last year was kind of an interesting year for me, because it took a whole year for me to update a lot of information that I was giving my clients about the industry that had changed. And there were through three, like, what you might consider minor changes that happened in the industry, but they were major enough that they made me make major changes. And it took a full year to make those
Hmm.
changes. But I think the reason it took so long is because I was working on small things that I wanted to make sure were done correctly. And so when you
Hmm.
want to start small so that you don't upend your whole life and your whole business, because it
Oh,
could. Last year, like you said, with your major upset and my pivoting and everything, it made last year a really tough year. And we've talked about maybe having
hmm.
an episode about 2025 and or 2024 and what happened that year, and why it was probably really not just us, it was a lot of people in the industry that struggled last year. But
Hmm.
just understand that, as well as setting that timeline and giving yourself permission to change, also give yourself permission to start small. You don't have to change your entire brand if you've got just a few feedbacks that
Hmm.
maybe, like, for example, I had some feedback recently about some of my color schemes and how they were not as appealing to the male part of my audience as they maybe were to my female audience. And so what I did is I made a few tweaks to my color branding, because I wanted to make sure I accommodated those men that I serve in my life, without sounding sexist or anything like that. That's just kind of what was happening. And so I wanted to make sure that
Yeah.
happened. It wasn't a major upending of my business, but it was just a small tweak. And so I started small. I might have to make more tweaks later, but like, that's just kind of one of those things. Just start small.
Hmm.
It's okay. It's okay to experiment. It's okay to try things out. Ask for opinions. Don't be afraid to ask. And then the last thing I kind of
Yeah.
wanted to hit on this, is be accountable. Be accountable to yourself, and be accountable to your readers and your people that you're changing
Yeah.
for. And please, for the love of all that's good and holy, do not blame anybody else for mistakes that are made. It just looks
Oh,
bad on you. So if a mistake is
yeah.
made, or if you made the wrong choice in your pivot and you recognize that, don't blame anybody. I just own it. I took this decision. I made this decision. It didn't work out. I'm going to change it again, like whatever you need to do, but just be very accountable and honest with the whole process. It's going to make you look that much more a hero and less like a villain when you go through that whole process.
For
so
sure.
It's just crucial. So anyway, key takeaways. What are some key takeaways from this whole pivoting thing, Troy?
I think some of the key takeaways are one of them is just patience.
Yeah,
Patience.
That's a good one. Resilience.
Patience and resilience. The biggest thing, one of the biggest things we talk about when we talk about pivots and stuff is sustainability, making this a career you can do for the rest of your life. And making major pivots is stressful. Everybody knows that some of the most stressful things you can do in your life is get married, get divorced, move. Those are some of the top 3, right? Well, when you're making major pivots in your author career, when you're moving from one genre to another or whatever the case may be, that is a big move. That is stressful. Even if it's a positive thing, it's stressful. Trust me, if your book suddenly becomes a bestseller and you're selling thousands of copies and you're used to selling tens or hundreds of copies, that is stressful.
Yeah.
Right. That is a big stressor. It's a big change. So patience and finding ways to be mindful, to live in the moment and deal with things as they come and have systems in place before you need them. We talked about before, like getting your LLC early, setting up your email list when you have 10 people on it, all that kind of stuff. What that does is prepares you that if you have a sudden influx of people and sudden success, you're ready for it.
Right.
And it's not going to upend your life and it's not going to cause you problems. So patience and being prepared, preparedness and patience. That's 2 of the biggest things for pivots.
Yeah. And then I'm going to just say final word on this matter is embrace change. I want you to look at it as an opportunity and not as a setback. Change is a beautiful thing. As uncomfortable as it is, it's something that happens too often in this life for you to reject. Just go ahead and embrace it and let it happen. Let it wash over you. Just very much like Troy said, live in the moment. Just understand that it's happening and just go with it. Go with the flow. And then just like we said here, just plan and adjust and ride the wave, right? Just ride the wave. It'll be fine. It's not a setback. It's just as long as you get up and you ride the wave, you're going to get a little closer to your goal, and you can always adjust as you go. So just little pivots, little changes. I love the analogy of a sailboat, right? And I'm not very familiar with sailing, but I do know that when the wind shifts, they have to move that sail to capture the wind, right? So if you want to change direction of your boat, you have to throw the sail sometimes across the bow or the boat to capture the wind a certain way. And when they do that, they call it a jibe. And they throw the sail over the boat to capture the wind and to be able to turn the boat. And it's kind of exciting when it happens, because you watch the sail just kind of flip over and
just kind of flip over and fill up and
just blow capture that wind. It's really kind of, I've heard a lot of people who sail that's probably the funnest part about sailing is the jibe, but one of the things I've noticed in my business and in my life is that if you don't turn the sail, you can get stuck. So you do have to throw that sail across. And that's the pivot we're talking about. Just throw that sail, go ahead. And it's a full committal. When you do that, you can't just half-ass that thing. You have to throw that sail across the boat and capture the wind so that you can keep going. So I want you guys to do that with your businesses when you feel that the winds are changing. Just be smart, again, react here, and then think about it before you make decisions and act. So react here, think of, let your trigger happen, and then give yourself a second and permission to think on it and then move forward. If you have questions and you're not sure and you're like, oh, I don't know what's happening, but I maybe I need to bounce some ideas off people, you can certainly reach out to Troy and I. We're both very happy to help authors make decisions that are good for them, and we're in your corner when it comes to authors. This is our job. So please feel free to reach out to us, troylambertwrites.com or Stacey, or edits by Stacey.com or printtopro.com. You can also find Troy at printtopro.com. He's one of my partners there. So if you're ever just lost, and just go to printtopro.com. But anyway, we've got some stuff in the description that should help you. Troy's got some amazing tools that he's working on, and I'm excited about our next episode. We're going to talk about mental health in our business as an author, and we're going to kind of do a mental health check with everybody and we'll check in with everybody and see how everybody's doing. So we'll look forward to seeing you guys next week. But in the meantime, subscribe so that we can stay in touch with you guys. And again, if you have a topic you want us to touch on, please write it in the comments. We would love to talk about what you want us to talk about. We would love to dig in and see what's out there and what people are looking for. So we look forward to seeing you again next week, and you guys have an awesome week writing your stories, pivoting, doing what you need to do. All right. So thanks, everybody.